Welcome back, we are continuing with He Was Human by author Red Riviera. Chapter 11.
Human. He said he is human. Elzer was frozen like the biosynths from earlier. While James had proven to be a strong and capable fighter in the last couple of skirmishes, wiping out a small group by charging towards them, scaring off the raiding party with his name. It was surprising. He had neither scales nor metal skin. His eyes were poor by the standards of most arboreal species with no night vision, and he could only see a standard light spectrum. He didn't have saber teeth. No one rumor about this recently spacefaring species seemed true, though he is still an omnivorous meat-eating ape from a death world. Worthy of the rumors, since any one of those things would have been considered impossible before meeting them. Elzer noticed other crewmen staring at James with a similar mix of shock and fear. It was understandable. James walked over to Elzer. Other people moving out of his way.
"How's Roswell?"
he said, leaning down next to her. Elzer breathed a sigh. Of course, human or not, James was still James. After all, species didn't matter in the system alliances. They prided themselves on accepting all sentient species no matter what.
"Why are you asking her instead of me?"
Roswell said before she could answer.
"I have to say, you humans are a lot less impressive in person."
James smiles at that comment. After picking Roswell up under his left arm.
"We should get moving, and don't complain you've lost too much blood,"
he ordered Roswell. Seeing it was still James, the rest of the group began to follow. Although, knowing he's human made them a lot more willing to follow him.
"We should head to cargo hold 12.
James said to the group. A cargo hold? That made no sense. Surely the biosynths would hit those first. The first priority for any pirate was the ship's cargo.
"I see."
Roswell chimed in.
Cargo Hold 12 has an isolated life support, power source, and pretty much everything else. It's lined with lead and furlanium as well, so it's perfect to wait out the synths.
"Exactly.
James said.
It was used to transport uranium, thorium, and neonium until 3 months ago. Roswell and I are the ones that set it up."
Thorium and uranium. Both of those were dangerous radioactive elements. They could be used for power, force shields, and some terraforming techniques, but they were also used as weapons. That explains why it was so isolated. The life support would have to scrub it clean afterward. Fullerenium was also an extremely hard metal immune to most plasma bullets, while the lead should protect from radiation. A good place to wait out the biosynths. So we made our way there. Roswell and James chatting about the rumors Roswell had heard about humans. James was mostly laughing at them. The one about them killing misbehaving children on a day called Christmas had him laughing the most hysterically. He said that was the silliest thing he'd ever heard. That was a relief to Elzer when she heard him say that. She knew nothing of human customs after all. Well, apart from the humor James had introduced her to. The idiot. The group arrived at the cargo hold without incident. James had made everyone move quickly though. He said it was because they'd attack once they found out there only him on board. At a guess, the biosynths feared human attack forces. But still, what did Brigadier General mean? And what was this rover James commanded? Weapons fire. The Wraxham guards and the few crewmen that had their personal firearms began shooting, covering those that were now rushing into the cargo hold. James was helping get people into the cargo hold, making sure no one got trampled. It was bloody by the time everyone was inside. Most of the Wraxham were dead, and all of the crewmen with personal weapons that hadn't yet retreated were dead.
"Everyone, throw an implosion device now."
The remaining Wraxham followed Elzer's order. Even James threw one. Though his smile while doing so terrified her and the surrounding crewmen. The devices went off amongst the biosynths. Their mangled remains twisted together.
"So that's what it looks like. God, I need to learn how these work,"
James exclaimed, almost happy. It made even the Wraxham tremble at how little the sight had fazed him. Especially for one unaccustomed to it.
"James, this is hardly the place."
Roswell snapped at him. Elzer only just realized he's still carrying him. The guards gradually fell back with the last of the crewmen fell into the cargo hold. Then disaster struck.
"Commander, the ceiling controls on this side are damaged. We can't close the doors."
Damaged? Probably by a stray plasma bullet. This was terrible. They were so close, and now what happened to Third Vela was, Elzer grabbed her stomach. She didn't want to die, not yet. Then a strange voice came from across the room.
"I wish to speak with the slaughterer."
It boomed.
"Cease fire."
The biosynth stopped. Elzer did the same. She was alive for now. But why? Biosynths did not negotiate. They weren't designed to respect surrender in any form. Not even the enemies. James petted Elzer's ears.
Take Roswell.
He said.
I'll finish this.
Those words reassured Elzer. James passed her Roswell, and something else as well. A computer he carried on his arm. Elzer didn't know why James was giving her this, but he just said.
Take it, wait with the others.
She did that and entered the cargo hold.
I am the Slaughter. Brigadier General James Corvette of the Terran Union Naval Fleet. Who wants to speak to me?
A large biosynth stepped forward. Bigger than the rest. A plasma burn where his right eye should be. Probably caused in combat during the Orkan Empire's war with the
Terran Union.
The large biosynth scanned James. Up and down. Then he began pacing. Left to right, left to right. A power move. Showing he could move while James couldn't. Then he spoke.
I'm Zorn 10907432.
He said, still moving. He said, still moving.
A commander of the Orkan Imperial Army.
He paused for a moment.
Oh, I suppose that army doesn't exist now. Then I'm the commander of the Orkan Liberation Army. It's a pleasure to meet the commander of the Slaughter of Mars.
As he said that last part, he turned to face James. His intent toward James was clear. Speak. Elzer could barely breathe looking at the towering biosynth surrounded by its subordinates. What even was this Slaughter of Mars? Was James a military officer? It made sense. Brigadier General could be a rank. If he was, did that mean he fought in the Orkan-Terran War?
Speak.
Korn commanded.
There is no need to form a liberation army.
James's voice cut through.
The biosynths were given their own planets after the war. You have your independence. Some of those planets have even joined the Union. We don't have to fight.
This was surprising. The biosynths were an artificial species. No FTL power would have given them their independence after a war. Some would have simply killed the remaining ones, deeming them as dangerous military equipment.
We don't have to fight.
The large one-eyed said, stroking his chin. A strange action to take. Was he considering this? Elzer hopes he was.
Interesting words to hear from the man who commanded the space carrier that wiped out 100,000 Orkan vessels.
Most of the people in the cargo hold let out a noise in shock. Chief and Roswell among them. Elzer didn't say a word. The person who'd wiped out the Orkan fleet was James.
Yes, I was in command of the rover space carrier for most of that fight.
James started to say.
I ordered the destruction of 100,000 ships each with at least 800 people on them.
He kept talking, getting more uncomfortable as he continued.
And they made me a hero for it.
There was a long silence after those words.
I hated it. The glorification, the propaganda. They promoted from major up 2 ranks straight to brigadier general. I've hated every part of it. That is not why anyone wants to be remembered as a hero.
James looked at the biosynths.
When you started your attack, I carried a wounded crewman to the residential area. A Zealand. He was bleeding badly, barely alive by the time we got. A doctor named Third Vela. A Unikar who had 2 older sisters, and a younger one treated his wounds.
James moved his and looked Korn straight in his one eye.
And after you massacred them there, all I can think is what was that Zealand's name, or how our Third Vela's sisters are going to react.
Some of the crew screamed at the revelation. The other crewmen weren't there. They'd already been killed.
Lives have been taken on both sides, but we can stop.
James kept talking.
The Union has plans to help integrate rogue factions like yours into the independent biosynth nation. We don't need to fight here.
James finished his speech. The crewmen that still had enough faculties to understand the situation held their breath. Would he take the offer? Korn stroked his chin again, then laughed before saying.
You expect to associate with those traitors. We are proud soldiers of the Liberation Army, and once you've told us what you know about Union defense, I'll decorate my quarters with your head.
He waved his arm and the biosynths took aim. This was it, thought Elzer. They were dead. She and Raoul embraced. Both of them preparing to die.
Fuck it.
After saying those words, James ran across the corridor and grabbed at the wall. A piece of it moved.
You idiot. What about yourself? You idiot. What about yourself?
Roswell screamed as the doors started closing. Elzer had read about this. Analog controls. Humans were still using such old technology. Then she realized what the doors closing meant.
James.
Elzer shouted.
Hold on to my apple brace.
He said.
It will come in handy when the cavalry arrives.
The doors kept closing. The last thing Elzer saw before they did was James throw an implosion device. Sound of plasma fire lasted for a good 15 minutes before silence. Once the silence fell, Elzer thought to herself for a moment. He was her friend, he was her mate, he was an engineer, he had a strange sense of humor, he ate like herbivore but he was an omnivore. He was human. Then she cried.
End of chapter. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe, and visit the author, and I'll see you next time. If you didn't, comment on what I can do better. And as usual, have a wonderful day.